Hello ladies and gentlemen, Nick here, and welcome to my review of Doctor Who Season 19, Story 4, The Visitation. Now, after 3 disappointing first stories with the 5th Doctor, the 4th story thankfully gets things back on track. We finally have a good 5th Doctor story at bloomin' last! So the plot of The Visitation is the Doctor is trying to get Tegan back to Heathrow Airport, and I've realised that at some points between Logopolis and the story, they're now calling it Heathrow Airport rather than London Airport. I'm going to have to check when they actually changed the name from London Airport to London Heathrow Airport. But they're trying to get back to Heathrow, but they arrive in the right place but the wrong time. Pretty much the exact same thing as Fall to Doomsday, but, well, the opposite thing to Fall to Doomsday, where it was right time, wrong place. So they arrive in 17th century, what is now Heathrow Airport in West London area, and they encounter a highwayman called Richard Mace, who helps them escape from some locals who believe they're carrying the plague. It's revealed it's 1666, although we find out it's 1666 specifically at the very end. And they decide to go to this local house to stay, to have a look around, basically. They're hiding in the barn, and then they go to the house to have a look around. Turns out that the owners of this house were killed by an alien killed an alien, but they were killed by their android and the remaining aliens. There was a group of 4, now 3, have taken over the house as their base, with 2 of them going off to their London base, where they would carry out their plan, which is to spread an even worse plague. Continue spreading the plague, but a more genetically modified one, so it's even worse than before. And basically kill out everybody, so they can take over their planet. And they turn out to be pteroleptals, which are a race that, in some cases, they've got this sort of a civilization, but at the same time, they're also pretty warlike. And it turns out that these ones are criminals, fugitives to be precise, and their leader is hiding out at the house to help finalize the projects with his androids, and that's when the Doctor and company turn up. So with the Doctor threatening his plans, the guys tries to have them captured, and also tries to get try to get the TARDIS, whilst the Doctor gets knitted to create this little machine that will destroy the android. So that's basically the plot of The Visitation, before they move on to London, where they have to stop the pteroleptals once and for all, and also at the same time accidentally cause the historical event, being 1666, London. I think we all know what this historical event is. I'll give you a clue. It starts in Pudding Lane in London. That's right, it's the Great Fire. Well, the fire itself was a massive dick if it had a brain. Was not nice, but it's nice to have this historical event tie-in with this story. And also, for the first time in a while, we've actually had a historical or pseudo-historical story. I think the first time since Horror of Fang Rock. Yeah, there were stories where they went out and there was some historical periodic dressed people, like certainly Androids of Tara. They were historically dressed people, and we had people from different points of history in Fall to Doomsday. But that's about it, I think. So it's nice we're getting a bit more of a pseudo-historical story here. And I think it works. I think it's a great, really fun story. Got some really good stuff. There is a few slower moments and a lot of talking bits. And Lissa really is put out the way just to be out the way, basically. But she has her use. But her scenes with the machine are good. and it comes to a good end. Tegan and Adric get captured. Adric does manage to escape, but Tegan is recaptured and sort of possessed by the little bracelet thing, as is Richard at some point, at a small point, and it's in the scene at the end of part 3, well, towards the end of part 3, where the sonic screwdriver is destroyed. P.S. The sonic screwdriver sort of got underused in this story. I mean, the Doctor was going to use it as part of the machine, and then the Doctor sort of didn't think it'd be very useful to unsonic his handcuffs to get out of those that he had been locked in by the pterodactyl. So, yeah, you can, because John Nathan Turner wanted to get rid of the sonic screwdriver because he felt it was overused. I wonder how he'd feel about the use of the sonic screwdriver and amount of use in the new series. But certainly he felt it at the time that it was being overused. So he had it destroyed, and they didn't bring it back until the TV movie. Although the Sixth Doctor did have a sonic lance in Attack of the Cybermen and maybe one or two other stories. But it's not the same. So technically this is the last story of the classic series, if you discount the TV movie, where the Doctor has a sonic screwdriver. The Third Doctor or Fourth Doctor don't even use their ones in the 5 Doctors. Second Doctor doesn't either, nor in 2 Doctors. So, but oh well, it's a good way for it to go out. It's just getting destroyed and a nice little reference. I think it should have been used a little bit more in the story, so it would have been a bit more impactful. Well, but unlike the TARDIS, I don't think there's going to be much tears shed over it, and even less now because of A, of its even more overuse, and B, because the Doctor can easily replace it. Something that he chooses to do more in his new series incarnations than 5 did. He chose not to build a new sonic screwdriver. Again, it was the writer's idea. But that being said, all the scientific stuff also kind of works, and the sci-fi element also works. It's a nice blend of sci-fi facts and sci-fi fiction. The other stories had been doing a little bit of that this side of the regeneration, but I think this story sort of hit the nail on the head, and I think it's just a great story. It's a great, fun, enjoyable story with some great characters. Richard is a good character. I like him. He's fun. I do think the villagers are very prickish. They don't listen. They're those stubborn idiots again. I hate those stubborn idiots. Just because they're strangers doesn't necessarily mean they're carrying the plague. Idiots. And they shouldn't be executed without a trial. Thankfully, they don't get executed. If there was really anything negative I had to say, well, like I said, I think maybe Nissa does get sidelined a little bit, sorry for the creaky chair, in the second half of the story when she's playing with her device, Adric too a little, but I don't think as bad as some people might think. Certainly not as bad as Nissa being put to the side in the last story, or some of the cases in the 60s where someone had to leave, where Barbara, for example, in Sensorites was just on the spaceship and we hardly saw her. Although I do think with Jamie although I do think the bit in the Mind Robber where they had to get a replacement actor in for Jamie when Fraser Hines had chickenpox, and they had that game of sorting the face out. I think that one was a very good way of having someone out of the story for a bit because of reasons. But some stories you would have a companion or a character just leave the story for a few episodes or an episode or two. Here, at least, they do have something to do. So, yeah, and like I said, with Series 11, it's, I don't know if I mentioned in this review or with the last review, whilst it can be argued that it does have a lot of characters, a lot of companions in the TARDIS, they do have, at least during every other episode, they do have stuff to do. So whilst every episode it can be a bit of a chore to get stuff for every character to do, it doesn't mean that nobody gets nothing to do. And the same could be said for the 60s companions. I will say the Visitation, along with Black Orchid and Earthshock, are very good examples of the companions doing stuff together, having stuff. I would also argue Fall to Doomsday, maybe. Castrovalva Adrix out of the way quite a bit. Nissa's out of the way quite a bit. Logopolis, Nissa isn't there for the first episode and most of the second episode. But yeah, Visitation, I think it's a good story, a great story. In fact, it's a really great story. I really enjoyed the story on the rewatch, and even more than before. I had a really good time with it, and I think it's a great pseudo-historical adventure. And the first great Fifth Doctor story. It's the first not mediocre or worse Fifth Doctor story. At last, it only took them 4 stories. Yeah, other Doctors it would take 1 or 2, maybe 3 at a push. So I'm going to give The Visitation a 9 out of 10. I did have it at an 8, but I enjoyed it quite a lot on the last round, so I decided to give it a 9. Also with the mask of the guy, it's actually, I think it's animatronic. I think that's the word. Like with the Jadoon, they remote control the words whilst the actor's speaking with it. I think the difference is that the guy in the costume is speaking, which is why it sounds a bit muffled, as opposed to something like the Jadoon where it's recorded on a voice modulator, and then maybe added in a more updated version is added into post, maybe. Certainly it's done on a voice modulator by Nick Briggs, as opposed to the actor inside the costume. For example, Paul Casey, who's pretty much the monster man for the new series, saying from inside the costume the words. He just has to listen to Nick on set if he brings his voice modulator on. But with this one, they didn't have a voiceover person here. They just had, I think they had the guy in the suit, and it doesn't quite work as well. They did it with the Daleks, with the voice modulator, and the people inside the suits just had to flash the lights. But didn't quite work. Wasn't quite the same with this one. But I do think the guy has a pretty decent, scary, villainous voice for this reptilian villain, so it can be forgiven. So yeah, that's it from The Visitation. Thank you for watching. Next time we'll be having our last historical Doctor Who story, the first since the Highlanders, and the last overall before it became 100% pseudo-historical, or at least on screen anyway, Black Orchid. And if you've seen my friend Matt's video on Who Universe about historical stories in Doctor Who, he points out that this story didn't get quite so many good ratings, at least broadcast ratings. He believes it's because it follows. The BBC thought it was because it was historical. Matt believes it's because it follows a pseudo-historical, so basically another historical setting story, which Visitation is, and a bit more of a more interesting part of history, and with aliens as well. So it's a pseudo-historical. So yeah, having a historical right after a pseudo-historical might not have been the best move. I think Visitation should actually have come earlier in the season, because that would also give it, let's say, a story's gap, to allow a break between 2 historical and pseudo-historicals, like we get in the new series sometimes. For example, it takes you away as a historical setting in story in Series 11. 2 episodes later, you've got a historical setting with the Witchfinders, but you've got an episode in between that is more of a sci-fi adventure with Kablam. So, yeah, something like that could have worked. Or with the older series, it's like you got Marco Polo, then you get the which is a historical story, then you get the Keys of Mariners, which is a sci-fi one, and then you get the Aztecs, which is a historical, then Sensorites, which is sci-fi, then Reign of Terror, which is historical. So that would have worked if there was a sci-fi or contemporary story in the middle. Then I think this might have worked. But no, you got 2 historical setting stories right next to each other. So that's why Matt believes that the ratings for this story went down a little bit. Also, Visitation being earlier on in the season would also would mean we would get to our first good Fifth Doctor story sooner than 4 stories, which is pretty much halfway through the season. Which means we're halfway through season 19 means we're halfway through the entirety of Doctor Who, excluding wilderness years and special seasons. But out of 37 seasons, we're halfway there. Maybe we'll be up to season 38 by the time we finish these, but which means the end of this season would be the halfway point. But at this point, we're exactly halfway through the entirety of Doctor Who, from 1969 to 2019. Yay! Like I said, if these finish by the time series 12 starts around by the time these finish, then the end of this season would be the halfway point of Doctor Who between 1969 and 2020. So yeah, anyway, that's it from me. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time for Black Orchid. Goodbye. Don't forget to click below to subscribe to the official Nicholas Payne Retro YouTube channel. And they turn out to be pteroleptals, which are a bit of a kind of a... I wonder what he would think of I wonder what he would think of the new series' amount of use. I wonder how he'll feed. But that means. So I will say Visitation is probably the best example of all the companions doing. And yeah, I can understand why what. And that would also help by making that it would be, and it would also help that it being earlier in the season would also help being the first proper story and a better story, and also it being and also early.